do you believe you will be able to teach transformation? On the one hand, you said transformation is a personal experience that has to be consumed and enacted by the individual, but can transformation as you envision it be taught?
I'm not sure. It can be facilitated. I think I prefer that word. So, experientially. So, for example, you can have people inside of conversations, and what you do is through their own experiences, they begin to examine their being, their state of being. They begin to examine their attitudes, their belief systems. They begin to examine their actions. And it's through doing that experientially, individually, that transformation occurs. Because you see, you can be dwelling on something for quite a while, and then all of a sudden something happens and you get an insight. And you know what that is like. When you get an insight, your entire world shifts. So that's the kind of methodology where it's not in the teaching, but it's in the belief that it is immanent. It's inside of us already. It may be cluttered up, but I am a strong believer that we are all children of God. All of us go astray. From the human perspective, some of the going astray may seem more horrendous than others because of the impact of it, but the fact is that all of us go astray. So if we can learn to just be gentle to ourselves and be kind to ourselves, forgive ourselves, so that we can have like a clean canvas on which to paint something that is completely different. But you see, we go around and we carry all this stuff with us as human beings, and all this baggage. Even when we think we have forgiven it, the Bible says forgive 70 times 7. Sometimes it still comes up in our face. And it's just to have that level of awareness to know, okay, it will come, but I can choose now to put it aside and look at things completely differently. So for me, transformation, as I said, has to begin with the individual. And I like what you heard when I said that, because you said responsibility. So it is taking responsibility. Now, there are people who say, if you are poor and living in the ghetto, how can you take responsibility? I'm saying, yes, we can. We can take responsibility. I grew up in very, sort of disadvantaged circumstances in a place called Rollington Town in East Kingston. When I was growing up, it was probably like lower middle class. But we had things tough. But the values that my mother instilled in me made me recognize that there was nothing in the world that could stop. And we have examples in history, of examples right here in Jamaica, of Jamaicans who, when they looked at their circumstances, they had to pierce through the veil of those circumstances and take responsibility for their lives in whichever way they could. And in that way, it's amazing when you can do that. That the universe, it's like the universe opens up to you. Things come your way that you may have been there before that you didn't even see. Maybe it's just to contact one individual who you can have a conversation with that can help you on your way. So I know that what's missing in Jamaica now is that inability to be so aware that we recognize that at the individual level, whether you are the Prime Minister of Jamaica or a young man living in one of the inner city areas, or a young woman, that you do have, with God's help, you have a certain amount of control over your life and over your circumstances. Not the other way around. It's not your circumstances that control you, but it's you. You have the power, and once you know that, and you can take that power back from wherever you may have sent it, then miracles occur.
I'm Al McFarlane. You're listening to Conversations with Al McFarlane. My guest is the former First Lady of Jamaica, the Honorable Beverly Manley. And we're continuing. She's working on transformation, and she's particularly interested in gender and development. What does it mean for today? The role of women, the relationship between women and men, and women and power. I'm interested in how we teach, train individuals, and as a class, women who have been excluded from power, to know and exercise power in their own voice, in their own right, and on behalf of themselves and humanity. What do you think?
And let me give you a quotation from my book, because I think I'm doing a book signing. I'm not sure, but I think I am when I'm in Minnesota. I tell the story of when I first met Fidel Castro, and we're having a conversation. and we're talking about the working class and talking about women. And he said to me, you know something, Beverly, long after the working class struggle has triumphed, and we know the impossibility of that, the near impossibility of that, the gender struggle will still be ongoing. I was so upset as a gender activist, and I told him so. And then years later, I started to think about it, and he's right. Because as difficult as the working class one is, the gender one is particularly difficult. I think it was the American white women who coined the phrase and said, part of the problem with the gender struggle, the women's struggle, is that we're sleeping with the enemy. It's really, that whole emotional thing is wrapped up in it. Having said that, there can be no development without addressing gender issues. And to quote again, this time I think from a UNDP document that was prepared before we went to the Beijing conference in 1995, but they said development, if not engendered, is endangered. And a lot of the development we're seeing today is ineffective because we cannot get to the stage where we are looking at what happens to women, what happens to men, and critically, what happens to them in relation to each other. So for example, you could ask a question like, when a man is leading a country, what are women doing? When men from the ghetto are out there shooting and carrying on, what are the women doing? When you have unemployment among men and women, and you say young women, young men, and you say unemployment is high among young people, if you don't put a gender lens on it, it's not that meaningful. Because when you look at the age group, I'm using this as an example, 14 to 24 in Jamaica, and you look at unemployment among young men and among young women, it's twice as high among young women. When men stand up on the corner, what are women doing? Why are women having babies? Who are the men who should take some responsibility for this? So if you were to boil it down to very simple terms, gender is not about women. Gender is about looking at women, looking at men, and in their relationship to each other. And at the community level, for example, you may call a meeting to discuss community issues, and 9 men turn up and 1 woman. And the feeling could be, why are women not coming? Why are they not interested? Maybe you have called a meeting at a time when they're cooking dinner. Right. Because society and all these roles that have been constructed for men and constructed for women, we are supposed to be the nurturers. I mean, we have all these either-or stuff that we really need to get rid of. Because I know men who have brought up babies from they were very young, who are the most nurturing. I also know women who are really not that interested in either having babies or bringing them up. So as human beings, we need to just look at roles and responsibilities for each gender, how they relate to each other, and how when we collect the data in that gender disaggregated way, how it can lead to a more effective type of development. So if you look at transformation and you put a gender lens on it, it's similar for women as it is for men. But women have to take into account that inside of our own paradigm, there is this oppression, there are these laws that discriminate against us, that there are these attitudes against women that continue to perpetuate themselves, and that in looking at ourselves in that way, we have to be able to deal with those. Because I think it was the Italian philosopher, Gramsci, said, to a certain extent, oppressed people consent to their own oppression. You know, because you're part of the society. So it's amazing how much of it you take inside of you. It's not those people doing it to us alone. It's what have we decided, what have we said to ourselves about what they are saying about us. And when you do transformation work, you recognize more and more that what is critical is not so much what society says about you or what anybody says about you, but what are you saying about you? What is that voice in your head saying every time you say, I'm going to get my power and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that? What's that voice in your head saying? Who do you think you are to be doing it? You just need to be aware of the consent you have given to yourself. And then, of course, you can choose different. The issue of power is something that has always fascinated me as well, because it does take courage.